Okay, so I think we can get started. So thank you all to everyone who's with us. This is an extra fun opportunity for Zioness to be among friends, having a great and uplifting conversation. And, Ebony finds a way to make any conversation uplifting, even the challenging ones, even the hard ones. And she brings her very signature joy and brilliance to everything she does. But again, this is a really special opportunity that we've been excited about for a long time. And the conversation started last month for Black History Month. We always want Ebony for every opportunity at Zioness, but between Black History Month last month and Women's History Month this month, Ebony was the perfect person to join us for a conversation, especially in light of the fact that her new book, Bet on Black, which is of course on the table behind me. Darrell, can you hold up your copy? Bet on Black.
Bet on Black.
On the table behind me. Just came out about a month ago, and Ebony has been all over the country doing book talks on news channels and the morning shows, telling her story. And you'll hear more obviously about it from her, but it's different in the sense, and this is something the Jewish community can really understand, that instead of talking about the challenges, not that the challenges don't come up, but instead of thinking about the threats and the fights that we have as a Jewish community, it's so nice sometimes we get to actually celebrate the beauty of being Jewish. And that's what Ebony does in this book, celebrating Black culture, Black joy, Black history, the Black contribution to America, her own story of overcoming and creating and building and crushing it in so many different ways. And so really you have to buy the book. And I want to also pitch the Audible version of the book, which Ebony reads. And if you don't know Ebony, you will hear her personality come throughout the conversation tonight. And that's what you also get in the Audible. So I highly recommend both buying the book and listening to it on Audible. So just a very quick introduction to, the context of Women's History Month and this conversation before I turn it over to Darrell, who I'm also, by the way, so thrilled to have on the Zioness team. And, he's really excited to do this conversation. So Darrell, it's such a joy to have you with us leading this conversation tonight. So, and Darrell actually wrote this for me. I got to give that credit where it's due. That every month since 1987, our country has celebrated women's achievements and contributions during Women's History Month. And this year's theme, which of course made perfect sense to have Ebony be our featured speaker as kind of a book club version of our Women's History Month event. This year's theme is celebrating women who tell our stories. And that is, Ebony's whole life has been telling her story, the Black story, the American story, and, doing it through so many different lenses in media and law. So all of us at Zioness are thrilled to not only celebrate Women's History Month, but to continue our yearly commitment to centering the voices of Black Americans. It's not just a yearly commitment, it's a daily commitment to centering the voices of Black Americans with this intimate conversation with loud and proud Zioness and my very dear friend, Eboni K. Williams, with her latest release, Bet on Black, the good news about being Black in America. And I am so excited to turn it over to Darrell. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Amanda. Ebony, welcome back to Zioness Zoom. I'm excited to talk to you. For the folks who are just joining us for the first time, is this your first Zioness event? Welcome to Zioness. This will just be a quick peek into the fun that we have at this organization, while making sure everyone who wants to be included in progressive spaces and domestic social justice movements is seen and celebrated and welcomed. And so, Ebony, I'm excited to talk to you about this very timely book for the season I find myself in right now. I just want to give a quick intro to you for the folks who don't know Eboni K. Williams yet. So folks, we are joined by author, attorney, thought leader, frequent guest host of The View, former correspondent for CBS News and former anchor at the Fox News Channel, executive producer and host of the NAACP Image Award nominated podcast Holding Court, which I am a weekly listener, Real Housewives of New York season 13 alumna, and soon to your screen television host of the syndicated court show Equal Justice with Judge Eboni K. Williams, which I think makes you, Ebony, the youngest person with a syndicated court show on TV in history. So welcome, Ebony. So
what
nice
an introduction. I've got to travel with Amanda and Darrell here. I just have to say, Zioness is my family and my community. And, Amanda is one of my closest friends in the world. And Darrell, you and I have also developed a beautiful friendship and relationship over the past several years. And I just couldn't be more thrilled to join the Zioness community tonight. And I know we're going to get into all things Bet on Black and celebrate women and Women's History Month, but I would be remiss to speak on this particular night to this particular community and not just say one word around the importance of collective energy as it relates to global democracy, and of course, all the going-ons right now in this moment for our friends, family, and loved ones in Israel. And, I just want to say that one of the through lines in this book, Bet on Black, the good news about being Black in America, while I did write this book for Black audiences, I'm really excited about people beyond Black identity reading the book, because if you are invested in a global democracy in this moment in our global history, our kind of worldwide history and experience, then you are bought into the themes of this book and this moment. And I just hold so much space and love for Israel and its community right now.
Thank you, Eboni. And folks, we do plan to address democracy and patriotism. And we also, are aware and want to be mindful of the audience that we do have, and making sure that, as Eboni was mentioning, though this book was written for Black audience by a Black woman, that there are so many nuggets and big pieces of information for anyone of any identity or multiple identities throughout. So just another a bit to purchase the book or listen on Audible if you haven't already. So Eboni, before we actually get into the book, I do want to do a bit of an expanded bio and introduction for you, again, for the folks who don't know you yet. Because this really hits on the very notion of Black excellence and the holistic view of us as people. So in addition to all of those incredible things I mentioned in our opener, you're a homeowner in Harlem, USA, a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I just have to give a shout out
To you, your mama.
Yep, she's on here.
Hey, mama. Hey, mama. Hey, Sora, mommy. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for getting me some brownie points, Eboni. Eboni, you, as the book says, and just from knowing you, I know you are a child of God, a woman of faith, and a daughter of Louisiana. I know Charlotte raised you, but as we do in Louisiana, we claim our people. Yes. I include that. I include that because, number one, the only way we know where we want to go is knowing where we've been. And there are so many voices and forces in this world that want Black people and other minorities to feel not qualified, to feel that we lack the real world experiences to be in any space we deem necessary for ourselves. And unfortunately for them, all of who we are may not fit into a resume or into a LinkedIn profile. And so as we go into this conversation, I want to start there because your career, this book reinforces the idea of what Black excellence is. And that our worth is not confined to what others want it to be. And so, Eboni, just the first question I have, and this is really going to be a discussion, not so much I'm throwing questions at you, but I do have a question, why Bet on Black? Why now? What were the catalysts for writing this book? And why was this the season you find yourself in now?
I think the best and most direct way to answer that inquiry, Daryl, goes to the very recent appearance I had on The View, right? It was the day the book came out. Obviously, the manuscript and everything has taken place over the last year and a half, but God makes no mistakes, as you mentioned, Daryl. I am a believer, and my faith is important to me. And it is not an accident that on the day of this book being released, Bet on Black, the good news about being Black in America, written by a Black woman named Eboni Kiana Williams, I happen to be sitting at that beloved, revered table at The View. And the headline news of the day was coming out of the state of Florida, where the state's governor decided to prohibit, essentially, Black study at both high school, secondary, and higher learning education spaces. And I got the benevolent opportunity to address him head on. And I say him, Daryl, but really what we're talking about is a psyche. We're talking about a state of mind that, as you say, really dismisses and disqualifies Blackness as a legitimate course of study, a legitimate thing to pursue, a legitimate consciousness to understand. And as somebody who very proudly holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in Black and Africana diaspora studies, oh, it did my heart a world of good to be able to flex on Governor DeSantis and those that think like him, right? That we find ourselves as a nation in this obvious time of fighting for the very fabric of our national identity, Daryl. You know, when it comes to, if you are an American that truly believes in the value of the collective fabric, the melting pot, all the things that we say we are as a nation, and that I believe, and I know you believe, and I know people sitting in this conversation tonight believe, then not only do you permit the studies of Blackness or queer studies or women's studies or European history or other like, you celebrate it, you advance it, you amplify it, because you know the truth, which is that we as a nation and as a global diaspora are only strengthened by the broader understanding of our distinctions and similarities. But if you find yourself in fear of what that collective tissue looks like, and you are insecure and perhaps a bit incompetent around where you would stand and take up space and be valued amongst the broader diaspora and global identities, then you do what some are doing right now, which is you ban books, you prohibit curriculum and study, and we just can't afford it as a nation. And I believe, as Baldwin says, Amanda's going to do a running tally tonight on how many times I quote Baldwin, which is so much fun. And then we're going to take shots tomorrow night to reflect it. Anyway, as Baldwin says, I believe America is the most fantastic country in the world. And because I so believe that, Daryl, I preserve the right to mercifully critique her until she becomes everything she ought to be.
I love that. And thank you actually for mentioning the good brother James Baldwin, because something that folks, if you haven't read or listened to the book, please do. I will try not to give too much away. But throughout the book, Eboni, really at the start of the book, you dedicate the book to your familial ancestors. And throughout the book, you invoke them, your mom, Mama Gloria, who I guess I know of through the podcast.
Yes. And all her shade. Yeah, go ahead.
So there's the familial ancestors, which I think everyone on this call understands, you know, it's your parents, your grandparents, the extended family tree, if you will. And then there's also the cultural ancestors you invoke, like Baldwin, Malcolm X, Dr. King, Frederick Douglass, even Denzel Washington makes an appearance in Bet on Black. And, you know, it strikes me as I see these names, I see these authors, I know what movements or what, you know, time in history that they're associated with. And I think most of the people who are on this Zoom right now also know them, or at least know of them. And yet you say Blackness is the single, I'm quoting, Blackness is the single most misunderstood experience in America. And on paper, that would seem to me as a contradiction, because I mean, Black people have been here since 1619, let's get that straight. So it's not like this new creation, it's not this new people. And Black people in our history is American history, something you also mentioned, just me knowing you and throughout this book. So, you know, grappling with how are 13% of the population as individuals, their experience as Blackness, how is that still the single most misunderstood experience in America? A statement I agree with, but for the folks who may be grappling with that, what insight or advice would you share as to how you came to make that very bold, very true statement?
Yeah, I'm gonna walk you through it. So here we go. We got to go back to 1619, as you mentioned, which is the year in which on the shores of Virginia, the first Africans were brought to this land, the shores of the new country, as chattel pieces of property, enslaved. Now, we know, Daryl, as good, reasonable-minded folks, that the good Christians, the good European colonizers and settlers, as they identified themselves, during that time would never be so inhumane as to enslave fellow human beings. That is not what good people do, and it's certainly not what good Christian people do, and these were indeed Christian settlers. So in order to bring bodies, cargo, chattel of African descent, the very first step in that process, Daryl, is to dehumanize. The very first thing that you must do to the Africans that were brought to these shores in huge vessels during the Middle Passage, you have to dehumanize those individuals first. They have to cease being human beings and they have to start being property and very valuable aspects of the establishment of America's commercial enterprise. And that work was done so well that you fast forward to my statement in this book, Bet on Black, The Good News About Being America Today. That work of rehumanizing us fully has yet to be accomplished. That's why I say it is the most misunderstood thing in America, specifically, Daryl, Blackness, because the enormous success that was done around perverting Blackness, really, which was to make it subhuman, to make it inferior, to make it intellectually not capable and disqualify all these things, narratives that came from a place of dehumanization. It came from a place of, how do we tell a story about these particular people that necessitates their enslavement, that excuses our abuse of them, and makes this all righteous in a way? And I know those are very strong words, but that's really what we're talking about. And so now you fast forward to 2023, and we're discussing America and Blackness. Well, we're really doing the work, Daryl, of redefining it, of actualizing it, making an accurate truth telling of what Blackness is, which is why I opened this book with chapter 1, accuracy. See, you can't tell me what it is to be Black in America. I will not buy a narrative that talks about, that even entertains the discussion of, say, Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's LSAT scores, when this is a woman who's gone to Harvard not once but twice, who was clerked for the very Supreme Court justice she was nominated to replace, who's done all the things, who has more judicial experience than most of her peers on that high court, the only Supreme Court justice in America's history, Daryl, that has ever had federal public defender experience, extremely elite legal expertise from this woman. And you've got those among us who will question this woman's law school admissions test results. Get out of here. That is a perfect example of the type of commitment to misunderstanding Blackness that I'm speaking about. And when you know the truth about it, you know how to reject it, reframe it, and repurpose it, and really embrace the actuality of just how dynamic of a people, how innately intelligent, how much sophistication, panache, swagger, and excellence that we actually occupy.
I love that. And folks, again, these are things Eboni references in the book. So if you don't know, read the book.
Now you know.
Now you know. And Eboni, so thank you for that. It reminds me of the importance that I know I grew up with, that's reinforced in the work that I do here at Zioness. A theme that was throughout the book is how you center yourself, your own narrative, your own story, your own peoplehood in context of larger systems. And I'm also thinking about how you say never to be a sidekick. And this is I guess a trope for Hollywood in a way, of making the Black character the sidekick, either to their own pain, trauma, or just in general.
Yeah. And Daryl, we also always die first in the horror movie. It's tragic.
Tragic. Another reason, I don't watch them. You don't have to look far for these Black sidekick figures, whether it's Iron Man, Kim Possible, even Matilda. I'll, throw a bone to Stacey Dash and Clueless, who also was a sidekick.
One of the original Black sidekicks, Dion to Cher, and then of course I reference Lisa Turtle, who many Black girls, she was our model. She was the most we could aspire to be, which was tangential to a centralized storytelling that featured the Kelly Kapowskis and Jesse Spanos of the world. So yeah, that's an old story, and we know it well.
And we know it well. And so one of the acts of, I'm thinking about Black History Month's theme this year was Black resistance, which is always just a timely thing to resist in all forms, whenever and however we can in our personal agencies. And one of the ways that I learned from the book, or reinforced from the book, was centering you, centering us, you, me, all of that. And I know both from the work that I do at Zioness, in the community that we're activating, equipping and inspiring to do the good work, there can be a hesitation to center yourself. Some folks have described it as feeling guilty or just not knowing how to demand their wants and needs, be it in professional job settings or in the activist setting that I'm more familiar with. In this book, I think maybe it's not like a step-by-step, but you're certainly equipping and inspiring people to do just that. And so is there a step-by-step, Eboni, of how to center yourself within a collective system, especially in a sense of resistance?
Yeah.
What could you tell the Zionist activist who's hesitant or reluctant, or what could you tell the young Black person who may be watching this of how to center your Blackness and yourself in a space?
Sure. So the first thing I would say, Daryl, is I do hope that this book is a little bit of a how-to guide. And that's actually some of the most powerful feedback I've gotten from people who have listened to the audiobook or read the book, or both, is that they feel this book serves as a blueprint of sorts. And again, yes, I am unapologetic in centering the audience as intended to be Black readers. But there's a reason in, I believe it's chapter 3, Disruption, that I tell an anecdote about when I was boarding a plane going to Charlotte, North Carolina from LaGuardia, looking a hot damn mess early in the morning time. And I'm stopped by one of the flight attendants for my beloved Delta Airlines. Shout out to Diamond Medallion member status. And this was a 6'2", blonde, blue-eyed, white, queer young man. And he stops me, he goes, "Oh my God, Auntie E, oh my God, is that you?" And I was like, "Child, yes, don't tell anybody." And he says, "Well, I have to thank you." And he got emotional real quick. And he says, "Because of watching you as this super bold, audacious, brazen Black woman on Real Housewives of New York, it inspired me to take that example of how you were unabashed in centering your identity as a Black woman and kind of copy and paste it towards my identity as a queer white man." And he was so inspired, Daryl, that he came out as a gay man to his own family, which was something he had not done previously. And of course, I was, moved to tears. I was already feeling away because I was literally reading the hard copy of Nicole Hannah-Jones's 1619 Project. So yeah, the point is, yes, I'm a Black woman talking about Black experiences and centering Blackness, but the same rules apply, right? What we're talking about is the inherent act of protest and resistance, as you frame it, right? That happens when you simply choose to live outside of the confines of other people's expectations. And this shows up in big ways, whether we're talking about the global protests following the murder of Brother George Floyd and people in the streets, and what's obviously happening in Israel right now, hundreds and thousands of people marching all night long and demanding, their civil liberties be. Those are big disruptive protests. And then there's the small everyday protest that happens just when you take up maybe a little more space than expected in the classroom, by raising your hand over and over again in a lecture setting, or at the workplace, by having the audacity to lead a project versus being secondary or subsidiary. And just, I guess the short answer to your final question there, Daryl, what would I tell young folks or people, period, who have some level of discomfort with centering their own identities and experiences? Disavow yourself of the notion that it is in any way selfish or self-serving, and know that in you insisting upon your own centeredness and liberation, you are creating invitations for others to do the same. And that has been my lived experience. And that is really one of the things I am most proud of about the work that I do in the world.
And that idea that authenticity and authenticity to yourself will attract that in terms of, you know, any interpersonal relationship that you're looking to develop or strengthen, which also reminds me of something you frame in a different way in the book that really stuck out to me was your personal board of directors. And I think most of us are used to a board or board of directors in a job sense,
Sure.
but your personal directors, you know, those friends who see you, you know, for the Jewish audience, creating that tribe that fully sees you and validates you. I just, that was a really powerful reframing of just a good group of friends, your best friends. And I think the importance of that, once you center yourself and you know who you are, and again, knowing where you have been and where you want to go, then finding those people who can support you along that way. So I really liked how you framed that. And I, you know, I'm thinking about my own personal board of directors, some vacancies, but, you know, filling those with quality people is
Make a point about that too, Daryl.
Yeah.
Having a personal board of directors is something that has been paramount to my ascension, if you will, both personally and professionally. You know, Amanda's on my board of directors. You know, she's up for election next year. We'll see if she makes it back. I'm just kidding. But you know, when I was going, for instance, through my home buying process, which I talk about in this book, and of course, I was recently so blessed to be featured in the New York Times real estate section talking about my Harlem jewel box. I was fraught with disappointment. Amanda said, ouch, fraught with disappointment in my underwriting process, in the search for the right property, being rejected, closing dates being moved. I mean, it was just very traumatic, actually, and stressful. And it was really important to have Amanda and a few other key pillars of strength to keep me focused, to keep me aware of my why. You know, again, I talk in this book, chapter 6, Leverage, specifically about how it's really hard to be free in this world when you don't own anything. So for me, this wasn't just about getting keys to this house, Daryl, to flex or to have some you know, swag. This was really about a component of my liberation in this world as a single Black woman. And all of those identities being germane to reasons I feel very tethered to liberation. And the last point about board of directors, Charlotte, it don't have to be your friends. Let me be very clear. I have some close personal friends, people that I love dearly, that are not per se qualified to advise me on personal or professional matters. So when you are looking, those of you listening to this conversation tonight, for your board of director vacancies to be filled, you want to look for people who have made choices that you trust and respect, whose judgment you kind of emphatically can get behind, and people that you know will tell you the truth. You know, people that you know and with love. So two things I have to have. I have to trust and believe that you are for my best interests, you know, so you got to suss out all the undercover haters. And then you also have to choose people who are willing to tell you the truth, even when it is not comfortable for either or both parties. So.
No, I mean, that's very helpful. And there are a few people watching this call right now who know I'm sort of in this season of my life that I mentioned earlier. And part of that is reevaluating who is on my board, kicking some people off as their terms had expired.
And that's okay.
And that's okay.
And they can, guess what, Daryl, they can reapply circa 2028 and that'll be just fine.
And we'll see where everybody is. And you know, that all reminds me of the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so, you know, I want to, I guess, shift the conversation a little bit. Folks, we do have some time at the end slotted for questions, by the way. I know some are already coming in, so if you do have any questions for the lovely, talented Eboni K. Williams, you can write them down or put them in the Q&A already, and we'll get to it. You know, Eboni, we've talked throughout this conversation about, you know, what's going on in Israel. You know, I think this is it's a timely discussion. It's a sensitive discussion for a lot of folks in the Zioness tent. And though we don't take organizational stances on the goings on of anybody else's government, it is still something that is impacting the Zionist identity and intrinsic connection we have to our ancestral homeland, which is of course now reborn as a modern nation state post 1948. And so folks are really grappling with patriotism, identity, their identity connected to a nation state. And I really was sort of recalculating my identity as an American, really like in 2020.
Yeah.
Though it didn't start there, I think I was always sort of recalculating my connection to this country, having lived through Hurricane Katrina and seeing how the rest of this country forgot New Orleans.
Yeah, you found out you were a refugee on your own homeland, right?
I sure did. I sure did. You know, someone did even ask recently, like, oh, so you were a refugee? No, ma'am, I was still in these borders.
That's it.
And so, you know, again, removing Blackness from an experience, because New Orleans isn't just Mardi Gras and gumbo. Those are two great elements of it, but there were over 1,800 people killed in Hurricane Katrina, and most of them were poor Black people. So, you know, 15 years later, seeing, you know, how folks in this country, how elements, how systems interacted and didn't want to interact with Black people and Blackness, I was sort of like, am I American? You know, I know when I've traveled, I kind of tone it back. I make sure I'm not loud or, you know, screaming to be labeled as the American. But at the end of the day, I know my freedoms as an American allows me to voice what I just voiced to you, to anybody.
Yeah.
And that, you know, that's what it is what it is. And so I'm curious, you know, you when you joined us for our Juneteenth webinar last summer, you talked about being a proud patriot. You talk about it in the book, you talk about it on Holding Court. And so I'm curious as to why this doesn't feel like a contradiction. And also with the personal note from myself, is this is something I'm still personally grappling with. I don't think I'm ever going to have an American flag on my front lawn for reasons. And that's my choice and my decision.
Sure.
But, you know, how do we grapple with the idea that we may not be seen as individuals, or, you know, our minority group, you know, Black people are 13% of the population, Jews are less than 2% of the American population. How do we grapple with feeling proud of a country, knowing its history, knowing its present, and still just kind of moving in an authentic way around that?
Deep, lots of compounding questions and really kind of competing ideals there in that inquiry, Daryl. I want to start by, of course, I opened this chapter in the book, which I call it entitlement or entitled, because I'm being provocative, which I'll get to in a second. But essentially, I am boldly suggesting that Black folks are entitled to be as American as anyone else. But I start that chapter with a quote from, I think, probably one of the greatest intellectual minds of all time, of any race or color, and that is W.E.B. Du Bois. And Du Bois gives us brilliantly the notion of double consciousness. And double consciousness can apply to various identities, as you mentioned. But of course, Du Bois is talking about Blackness and Americana as an identity. And his persistent tension with reconciling what it is to be both born an American and all that comes with that, and knowing this is indeed his technical homeland and all of that, and the history of his folk on this very land. And of course, being first and foremost always a Black man, and if that can even coexist with being an American in a country and on a land, Daryl, as you talked about referencing the Katrina experience, where this nation is so quick to tell us that we are outside of its national and natural identities. So part of why I am so relentless in claiming and proclaiming my American identity is to piss them off. I will not concede America to you, because you are no more entitled to her fruits or pain than I am. So I start with that premise. And a lot of this for me, Daryl, came during my global travels. I was a late bloomer, really starting global travel at 30 years old, and now I'm almost 40, and spending time, whether it be in Paris, as Baldwin did, when he ran from Harlem with $40 in his pocket and saying, there's nothing that can happen to me in Paris that could possibly be worse than what's happening to me in Harlem, New York. I felt that in my spirit, and I booked a flight. And this was, seriously, this was, I think I talk about this in the book. This is in 2016, and you can figure out the why there. Or my time in Rwanda, or my time in Johannesburg, or my time in Switzerland. Just when you're able to see the experience and live the experience of being Black, my time in Israel, right? To live what it means and how it feels to be Black outside of the very specific purview of America's preoccupation with Blackness and how it contorts it and perverts it. I just feel the need to take and run with the enormous privilege that it is to be an American. And frankly, somebody else who deals with this tension quite well, Daryl, is Paul Robeson. And Robeson talks about how, like almost every Black person I know, so don't ever feel alone in this, Daryl, we have almost all contemplated divorcing ourselves, rejecting, casting off the American flags, and saying the hell with it. At some point, it's just like any interpersonal relationship. I don't want to be where I'm not wanted, right? Like, I think that's kind of the basic premise underneath what we're feeling. But then Paul Robeson does this really interesting thing that I rock with, which is, well, hold on a minute. There's that, but then there's my folk, me and mine, have bled too much, died too much. Black folks have fought and died in every single war this nation has ever fought, starting with the Revolutionary one. And because of that investment of us as a Black people in the very liberation of America and what it means on the global stage, pardon my French, but fuck that, I'm staying. I'm gonna rock with it. I'm gonna have my flag. I'm gonna have my American eagle and all the other indicators of I'm as American as apple pie. And that too is a part of my resistance and my protest.
I love that. And you actually just the symbolism, which I think in apple pie, the eagle, the flag, I think it's unfortunate the way they have been co-opted or attempted to be stolen by groups that seek to oppress us or seek to claim this is what American values are, what the culture is. I just got my copy of 1619 Project. And so seeing how we were just weaved in all elements of the America before there was an America, it's very helpful and inspiring to hear a proud Black person, a proud Black woman reinforce her patriotism. Because in the best of times, I'm thinking about like the Black World War II fighters who went overseas, came back home to a lot. I'm getting my pilot's license. I'm thinking about the Tuskegee Airmen who paved the way for me to do that.
Absolutely.
And
Think
so
about Bessie Coleman, who was a brilliant Black queen. Before that was a phrase we used, who could not even get anybody in her own homeland of America to teach her to fly. This Black woman had to literally go to Paris, France. Once again, connecting to where we are sometimes permitted to be freer abroad than we are here at home.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is, that's just the tea of it all.
Well, now that I done dropped the Bessie Coleman on it, okay, well, I guess where do we go from here, right? Yeah.
No, which I guess this is the last, direct question I have before I let our audience, come in with any questions. I tried to look for this specific term or word in the book, and it wasn't in there, Eboni. And I'm curious if this was intentional. So you talk about, I don't know, honestly, I don't know if this was in the book or the podcast. I'm just meshing it all together. The words of K. William, all of the things. You talk about the early feminist movement in America and just how white that was. You even talk about why or how the Divine Nine even had to the uphill battle of being seen in those spaces, or specifically the sororities being accepted into those spaces that were deemed only for white women, in the suffragette movement specifically. And so I was looking, Ebony, for the word or term womanist in the book. And I did. And so if folks aren't familiar, just quickly, womanist is a term, I believe, coined by Alice Walker in the 70s or 80s. Ebony, correct me if
I believe that's correct.
and it seeks to describe a holistic feminist experience through the lens of Black women in particular, but Black people generally, and pushing back on the racist overtones of the feminist movement. And so, Ebony, was that something that was intentionally left out, or was that just I'm just curious?
It was intentionally left out, and I'm gonna tell you why. It's the same reason that I push back on the term African American. I believe in what Alice Walker is saying, what Bell Hooks is saying, what all of the great giants of Black feminism have laid before us. But maybe I'm just stubborn, Daryl. I just refuse to concede feminism, which simply means to believe in the equal rights of women broadly. I refuse to concede the use of the term feminism to white women. They don't have any more entitlement to the usage of that term for their experience than I do. So I certainly am not opposed to the usage of the term womanist. I am a womanist, and I'm also a feminist. And I will not allow white centeredness, because that's what we're talking about, right? When you take a term like American or feminist, and it only gets to be applicable to folks of white identity, that is just another, to me, iteration, another concession of white centeredness. And I don't concede to white centeredness. I told you, I already got a divorce from white comfort. So therefore, I insist on the actual application of the feminist term to very much, at least as much so, include Black women as women of any other identity.
I thought you might say something along those
lines.
Since I have you, I wanted to ask.
Exactly. So great. I love it.
No, Ebony, I really appreciate that. It was great to talk to the woman behind the words of this book. Again, a book that was very timely and seasonal. I should just say thank you for writing this book. There were not a lot of, I guess, surprises or new information in there.
For you.
For me.
We have to, let's put a pin in that. For you, for somebody who does this work in and out of his daily existence, who lives and breathes liberation, global tether of democracy, understanding identity. Like, you are, unfortunately for the world and for our nation, an extreme exception and rarity when it comes to your basic understanding of both the academic and practical nature of liberation. So I do not expect that this particular book would have, blown your mind or knocked your socks off in that way. But I certainly am glad to hear that it was probably just an affirmation of what you've known and continue to know more and more and more as you continue to process our lived experience. So thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, it definitely, it was definitely throughout sort of the fire under my butt that at times I need. And so again, knowing you, knowing literally your voice, I'm like, oh, Ebony's calling me out on my shit. So I gotta get it together. So Ebony, I just really appreciate that, and appreciated all of our conversations, and this one in particular. We have a few questions coming in. Thank you folks for lighting up the Q&A. Let's see, Leanne Kelly, Ebony, as a Black woman, you have said that the forward progression of Blackness is your true purpose in life. How do you stay the course and do not get weary, especially when you are the only one?
Well, thank you for that question, Miss Leanne. I'm glad to say I'm not the only one, which is nice. I I won't even try to name them because I would not do justice to the incredible plethora of brilliant Black minds and women and men too, like and non-binary individuals. You know, somebody that's on my board of directors is Dr. David Johns, for instance, who is just child, just such a gift. Like, I just thank God for individuals like that. You know, so I'm blessed to say that I'm not in it alone, because it's lonely work. It is lonely work, and I want to be honest about that. But one of the answers to why I keep going, and one of the things that gives me my fuel when I'm running on E, Daryl, I know what the world thinks of me when they see me. And when I say the world, I'm talking about Black folks, white folks, Jewish folks, queer folks, all the folks. They see me, and for better or worse, they evaluate the following. They say, this is a deeply intelligent person. This is a woman of sophistication and class. This is a particularly kind of objectively speaking, attractive, aesthetic woman. And this is a woman who is not taking any shit. And I say better or worse because some of that list of traits sounds really good to some people and really inspiring and very much like, I'm about that life, love it. Or it could seem very threatening and deeply problematic and disruptive. But what I know for sure, Daryl, and what keeps me going every single day is that what if people thought those same things about me, but they didn't think it was in spite of my Blackness, which has always been the case, but it was because of my Blackness? What if that? And my work is not done until that is the case, until people see me and the things that they celebrate and applaud and think are so fucking great. They don't think she's a special Black or she's different than the other Blacks, which I know you know that story all too well. We all do. They think that's actually what Blackness is. How about that? That is the work of my life.
That reminds me, my close friend of mine and former roommate, he would always tease me when we lived in LA together. He would always tease me that somehow I worked in that I was from Louisiana or from New Orleans. And I said, well, you know, I'm living in a city that doesn't always assume that I'm Black.
Right, they always assume you were Latino or Hispanic.
And it's like, I speak Spanish, but Black people can speak other languages as well. And I said, that is a form of resistance because I know that there's a lot of misconceptions and biases about what the South is. And, you know, who Southerners are. And so if I can weave that in nicely, just pepper that in as a little treat, then it, you know, it's a little bit of ground setting, and then it lets them say, oh, wait, you know, this is somebody from somewhere where I thought was backwards.
Yeah, it's labor. It's beloved labor of re-educating in those gentle ways, right? In those seemingly small ways that transform narrative and perception. I'm the same way. You know, I'm always talking about North Carolina and Louisiana both, because for the same reasons. People assume the Southern identity means we are somehow intellectually inept. We are lacking of sophistication, glamour, and class. And baby, they don't call us Southern belles for nothing, you know, and it's very important that in addition to my Blackness, I'm doing the work of redefining all aspects of my identity.
Yeah, I love that and wholeheartedly agree. I have a question here. First, love the book and holding court. Here's my question. How do we maintain our Blackness where our legal system wants to remain the status quo, or I guess keep the status quo with gun violence, and just the idea that in some states, in most of this country, guns seemingly have more rights than certain individuals. So the question there, which are attorney brain, Eboni, how do we maintain our Blackness in a system of oppression where the status quo is favoring guns and access to guns?
Yeah, well, I think what we know today in the wake of the tragedy that just happened at that school in Nashville, Tennessee, is that the guns have more rights than all people, actually. I read a quote on social media, I'm sure most of y'all have seen it, that said, well, damn, you know, if our legislative bodies and executive leadership will not even move to protect the lives of young white children, what more do we need to see? So I think those are two distinct kind of pursuits that would have to happen simultaneously in terms of the question, right? Your Blackness and its identity and your ability to center it has to remain consistent at your own doing. And simultaneously, for those of us that don't believe that Second Amendment rights, which I actually believe in the Second Amendment right, you know, we come from Louisiana, my grandpa didn't go nowhere without a shotgun in the back of his truck, because if you're a Black man in the Jim Crow South, you had to be prepared to defend yourself because you knew that your society would not. That said, we know that something has to be done about guns, no matter where you fall on the spectrum of rights around them. So, you know, as we continue to lollygag, we'll continue to see our children and family, loved ones, friends, and colleagues murdered. And I guess we must be okay with it because we're not doing anything different.
Yeah, I was thinking like, oh, this is a timely question, which I mean, I could say that if we did this webinar
every day. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's timely every day, unfortunately. Yeah.
There are a few questions in here touching about something, and I'm noting the time here. Ebony,
Yeah.
something that you and I are particularly very passionate about, but really repairing the Black and Jewish, I'm assuming Black American and Jewish American
Yes.
communities. There, you know, there is a schism. I do think some of it is a bit exaggerated, if I'm just being blunt and honest. And sometimes folks just don't even make the step 0 or step 1 and just meeting someone of a different background. But Eboni, just if you can share your thoughts and past experiences with everyone of kind of what you think best practices are, just in your you know, your opinions or feelings of repairing those that should be a natural synergy there, but repairing those relationships between Black
Daryl,
Americans.
I have to say how much I love you for giving me 60 seconds to fix the crippling
There's
debacle.
anyone who can do it. You can do it, Eboni
Oh,
K.
child, please. As you said, listen, this is the relationship between American Jewish people and Black American people, and I say them specifically because we know Jewish people, they are a people of global diaspora. We're talking about white presenting American Jews and Black Americans. Historically, it's been a beautiful, powerful, and very productive relationship. We've been fantastic strategic partners to one another. And what I have seen in my lifetime in terms of the deterioration of that, you know, the destruction of that has been devastating and consequential, might I add. You can visit my work on my website, y'all. I did a sidebar on this about the griot, I talked about it on Holding Court in the wake of the Kyrie Irving of it all. And I continue to do this work every day of my life. And Amanda and you, Daryl, are great strategic partners in this work. So the short answer is stay tuned. Those of us that know, if you know, you know, and we are doing incredible labor, including a documentary project that I'm now producing and working on that speaks to this direct issue. I am not conceding what I know to be a blessed, natural relationship and partnership between American Jewish and Black American communities, and we will get there. I do believe that in my deepest fiber of my being.
And she lives it every single day.
As do you, my queen.
Well, thank you guys. Daryl, you did an amazing job. Thank you. And Eboni, always learning from you, hearing from you is incredible. And I know it inspired everyone. I could see even from the questions how engaged people have been. And I was going to ask you, but I'm not going to because it's over. It's actually better not to ask you, but just to say it so that people feel inspired to read the book. Throughout the book, you give these different examples from your life. And I even learned a lot listening to the book and reading the book about some of those experiences that you've had, but you've put yourself in these uncomfortable situations over and over again, personally and professionally. And I'm sure that people that are kind of following your career a bit, but like don't know the details of it are like, well, why would she ever put herself there? Like, why did she put herself on Fox News? Why did she put herself in the Housewives, right? And like, those are just two of the examples. And I think, I mean, people should read the book and learn more about the story and why you did that. But it's just, I think, something I wanted to end on, that we have to make ourselves uncomfortable as members of minority communities, as people who are members of persecuted communities. And I'm not trying to compare the persecution in any way, but like,
Just generally, yeah.
Yeah, like that when you are living in your power, when you're actually living your values and your identity and you're really open about it, kind of takes the power away from the bully. And I feel like that's a thing that you really lived, and something that people have really seen from you, that, you know, I mean, anyone who watched you on The Housewives, and everyone knows, like, that's the only time I ever watched The Housewives. So I didn't have anything to compare it to. But watching you on The Housewives, the disarming, you know, by being in the space and being able to answer the questions and disarming, you know, the way that people kind of came at you. And that's just, we can't confront these challenges that our communities experience without being in the places where we can engage and have the difficult conversations. And I think the way you tell these stories in the book, and you tell about literally putting yourself into like the most uncomfortable places, and like, I mean, you thrive on it, obviously. Not everybody does.
Well, and I don't even know if that's true, right? I have made my peace with it, Amanda. But you've seen me cry over this shit. You've seen the devastation, and you know I'm at a much better place today. But that was, you know, neither Fox News nor Real Housewives of New York City were enjoyable experiences. But I wouldn't trade them for the world. I think that they were tremendously impactful. I know they were. And here's the tea on it. It's all very Brene Brown. If you know anything about her work, you know, she's like, who cares about the critic? You only can care about the people in the arena. And as somebody who, you know, is an academic and, you know, a social critic of sorts, I don't get to criticize democracy or anti-Blackness or the patriarchy if I am not willing to put myself on the front line and be in the arena, Amanda. And I understand everybody can't be, everybody doesn't want to be, everybody doesn't even have the skill set. But God has gifted me with a skill set, a temperament, a look, a resume that affords me passport access to these spaces. It's quite frankly my privilege, right? And so if I hold this privilege, I'm not going to shame myself around the privilege, but now what do I do with it? You know, so that's my why as to why I go into these uncomfortable territories. And like you said, it's the ability to like knock folks off their game because they're so cemented typically in their shame assumption and false shitty narratives about me and mine, and to be able to meet them on their turf and confront them with such confidence and frankly just like knowingness. That part is a lot of fun. And you're right, that part I do thrive on.
You thrive on it, and you're good at it, and you're being now more like you're not joking about it, but when you're
there is some levity. Yeah, I'm able to find the levity in it now. But that has, as I talk about in the process chapter, right? I got there over time. I got there as my confidence in myself increased, my professional credibility increased, quite frankly, my bank account balance increased. So I'm now, I got to tell the truth, child. So now I'm able to take those risks in a more calculated way. And frankly, I just hope they're opening doors for those that come after us and frankly, our generation, because we are getting to that approaching auntie status, me quicker than you, Amanda. But as we do so, you know, I can't wait to see what this next generation does, because they are fired up and they are ready to go, and they've got the skill set, and they will be able to build on what we are establishing right now. And that includes the work you are doing with Zioness. I don't even know what number event this is for me with you all, but every year I'm so proud to be here and honored to share space with you, my dear. I really am. I'm very proud of you.
We love you. We both all love you. Everybody at Zioness loves you. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Daryl. Brilliant job as always.
Do what I can. I do what I can.
You did good. You did good. Sora, mommy, you did good. Good night, you guys.
All right, y'all. Thank y'all. Good night.
Bye-bye.